Hello everyone and welcome to another Star Wars The Old Republic video, and today we are talking about a very interesting topic, which is new data mined information about the class changes that are coming with patch 5.0 with the release of Knights of the Eternal Throne. And seeing how the classes are going to change and they're going to be balanced has always been very interesting to me, as I'm a pretty avid PvP player. And seeing new abilities and stuff being added is also very exciting. Now, two quick things before I get started with the actual content of the video. And the first thing is, this video is gonna be pretty long. I was thinking about actually just doing 4 separate videos, and with each video I would just talk about one class, so I would just talk about the Sith Warrior or Jedi Guardian, then do another video where I just talk about the Imperial Agent, and do it that way. But I decided against it because I don't know, it'd just be too many uploads on my channel, and it's just easier to condense everything into one video. So the result is this video is going to be pretty long, but in the description of this video I will leave little benchmarks. So for example, I'll say at this minute is when I start talking about the Sith Warrior and the Jedi Guardian, and then at this minute when I talk about the Sith Inquisitor or Jedi Consular. And that way, if you're not so much interested in the class changes for everything, you just want to look at the class changes for one class, then you can go ahead in the description and just go to that specific part of the video. So that's the first thing I'll do. The second thing I want to quickly mention is, in terms of abilities and stuff, to keep the video a little bit shorter, I'm not going to talk about both the Imperial and the Republic classes. I'm just going to do Imperial, but obviously the abilities and all the changes that are happening are being mirrored. So everything that happens to the Sith Warrior is also going to happen to the Jedi Guardian. It's just the ability names will be different. So I'm just going to be doing it for the Imperial side because that's what I'm most familiar with, and also I just think in general there are more Imperial players than Republic players, especially of those people that watch my YouTube content. So putting all that aside, let's get right into the content of the video. So global changes. So now BioWare is taking kind of a new approach just in general when it comes to the way that they want new players to approach the game. And so classes have been simplified to make it more approachable for new players. So what that means is base classes may be removed from the game, which means when you go to character creation, instead of saying I want to create a Sith Warrior, you're going to immediately right off the bat choose, do you want to create a Sith Marauder or a Sith Juggernaut? And this isn't a new thing because it was implemented with the level 60 character token. So when you use a level 60 character token, it immediately right off the bat makes you decide which advanced class you want. And so it's not going to be something new that's added to the game. It's more so that when you're leveling up from 1 to 10, you won't be leveling up as like a Sith Warrior. You will have to choose whether you want to be a Marauder or a Juggernaut. And that's obviously going to follow through with the other classes. The next thing is ability pruning. So because we have base classes being removed, then advanced classes are going to be differentiated more so, meaning some abilities that were originally available for all the Sith Warriors, and I'm just using Sith Warrior as an example, it can be applied obviously to different classes as well, but just using the Sith Warrior as an example, let's say the Sith Warrior had an ability in general, so Sith Juggernauts and Sith Marauders could both use that ability. Well, now after patch 5.0 hits, that ability will only be available to one class, and then the other class will probably get another new ability to make up for the loss of that original ability. So it says here various base class abilities are now restricted to only one advanced class. And it's going to happen in a way by which, for example, ranged players won't be able to use melee abilities. And this further differentiates those ranged and melee classes and allows for people to really kind of personalize their playstyle. So if they want to play a ranged character, well then they're only going to have ranged abilities, and their ability to do melee stuff is going to be very limited. Another thing is there's no longer multiple stances. So for example, as a Sith Warrior, you could choose whether you want the Shien stance, the Surisu stance, or the Shichao stance. Well, now that's all going to become passive. So if you're spec'd in to be a tank, or the Vengeance Juggernaut or a Rage Juggernaut, you're immediately going to be given a stance. It's going to be a passive ability, so you no longer get to choose. And the reason was it ensures that you cannot accidentally select the wrong stance. And I'm actually very happy about that change because often when I change specs, I forget to change my stance. So I'll be playing, for example, an innovative Ordnance Mercenary with the high velocity glass cylinder, and I'll be wondering why my damage output is so low, and then 2 PvP games in, I'll realize I forgot to change my stance. And so that's obviously a very good improvement. Okay, this is just a small thing. Many abilities are going to get learned earlier than before, so you're basically going to be able to have a lot of your abilities earlier while you're leveling, which is not only going to make leveling easier, but I think it's going to make the game just more fun in general, because what's the point in having a really good ability that you're only able to get at like level 40, because you're not able to use that while you're leveling up to 40. So it's nice that you're going to be getting a lot of your abilities early. Okay. Now, this is very cool change. All casted and channeled abilities have been removed from melee classes, and they're turned into instants. And you're gonna see how that affects abilities like Ravage as we check out the Sith Warrior class changes. But it's basically to make melee players more mobile. So they're gonna be more mobile, and they're gonna be able to move a lot more, which is going to basically buff all melee players. The other thing is stealth players are now fully invisible, so there's nothing new there. I mean, there's nothing like, really to go into. It's just basically now you cannot see a stealth player. So if an operative is stealth, no matter how close you are to them, no matter anything like that, they're going to be entirely invisible. And the only way to de-stealth them is to use a stealth scanner or to use AoE. A guard is no longer tied to a tanking stance, so anyone can guard. And the 60-second droid, I don't know what that is, but basically it's just that 60-second droid stun. I don't know what that word is what I meant, but Scoundrels, for example, Sith Marauders, they all get this ability to stun droids for 60 seconds. Now that's just basically been removed, and you know how agents and smugglers and stuff, they have that ability to stun someone for a good 60 seconds. Like it's something that's used on NPCs. Well, that will now apply to droids. Before, it did not apply to droids. You need to have a specific ability called Slice Droid. That's what allowed you to stun the droids for 60 seconds. Now, basically all the people that could originally stun NPCs for 60 seconds, they can now stun droids. And that original ability has been removed. And here is the really bad part of this new update. Sorcerers, Sages, Hatred Assassins, and Serenity Shadows have all their abilities nerfed by 2 to 10%. So basically, their healing, their damage has been nerfed a ton. And honestly, it's about time. Sorcerers have for a very long time been very overpowered, and they've never been to a point where they're amazing and they kill everyone in seconds or anything like that, but for a very long time they've been the easiest class to play and probably the most used class. Like I've seen the most Sorcerers for the longest time in Fleet, and now it seems like they're going to be nerfed pretty hard. Each discipline receives a new passive at level 68. This does not include disciplines where the stance was moved from the advanced class to the discipline, because the stance counts as a new passive. So there must be something at level 68 for these disciplines, and so one of the existing passives now won't be granted until level 68. So basically that's going to be a little bit delayed. So a passive that you might be able to use right now at level 65, you won't really have that ability when the patch hits. You're going to need to get that at level 68, which isn't a big issue because it doesn't take much to level up. And then disciplines that already included the stance received a new ability because that stance was changed from an ability to a passive. It's a pretty small change, but basically it's always nice to get new abilities. Alright, now there's nothing really important here about the utilities. Basically the utility layout's just going to change a little bit. Now instead of having 3 tiers, you're going to have 4 tiers. And it's going to be the same thing, you have to get a certain amount of abilities in the skillful in order to reach the masterful. And it's going to go on like that. Alright, now, in the interest of making this video shorter, I'm going to skip through some of the less important stuff and just go to the more important stuff. And as you guys can see, they're all mirrored. So I'm just going to talk about the Imperial side and not really go into the Jedi Knight stuff. Okay, so Ravage has been updated. As you guys can see, it's an instant cast now, so there's going to be no 3-second channel. And that's basically what's been changed about Ravage. I'm really interested to see the animation because a lot of people love the Ravage animation. I do, and I love the blade dance even more. That's easily the best animation in the entire game. So how are they going to be able to keep that animation while having it an instant cast? I think they're going to have to end up abandoning the animation, which is going to suck because that is just one of the nicest things in the game when it comes to ability animations. The damage of Force Scream was nerfed by 9.2%, very unfortunate, but other parts of the Juggernaut did get buffed pretty hard. Intimidating Roar, for example, now paralyzes up to 8 enemies and prevents action for up to 6 seconds, so that's basically longer time and more enemies. All of these have become passive, and that's basically it. Guard is updated so that anyone can use Guard now. You don't have to be in tank stance. Single Saber Mastery just increases the damage dealt by your weapon by 20%, and all the other stuff has basically just been abandoned. Threatening Scream has been updated a little bit. Just in terms, actually that's just a cosmetic change. Some of these are just cosmetic changes, meaning the words have just been changed a little bit, but there's actually no change to the ability. so we'll disregard those. Alright, so in terms of discipline changes, focusing specifically on Rage, we have a new ability called, or a new passive called Enkindling Agony. And this just means Force Crush grants you that which makes your Obliterate or Furious Strike consume no rage. So it basically is a rage saver. And then this one's a pretty good one. It increases armor penetration by 15%. That already exists. You already get that. But then it adds on something else. It says and force attack damage by 3%. So it's a little buff in damage. Now these are just cosmetic changes, so we're going to ignore those. On to Vengeance. We get a new ability called Hue. Hue hurls your main lightsaber at the target. Slows its movement speed by 50%, and it's only usable on targets at or below 30% max health. It will replace Vicious Throw. So it's basically just going to do a little bit more damage than Vicious Throw, and it's going to also have the effect of slowing the movement speed of your opponent by 50%. Ravager is also updated. Basically right now when you're in Vengeance spec, everything's about increasing the damage of your Ravage. And so this specific passive increased your damage of Ravage by 5%. But now what it's going to do is it's going to increase the damage dealt by all your melee attacks by 3%, and then increase your Ravage by an additional 5%. So basically it increases your Ravage damage by 8% and your damage of all your other melee attacks by 3%. So it's a pretty big buff to damage. And as you guys can see, Brawn is going to be given to every single Juggernaut. So you don't have to be in Shen form to get it. And then there's really no big changes to the Immortal spec. They don't get a new, when you're in tank spec for the Juggernaut, you don't get a new ability or anything, which is pretty disappointing. I was hoping for the Immortal spec to maybe get a few new good stuff, because right now it's super OP and I love using it in PvP, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be getting anything too cool. Yeah, so there's just some changes. They're not too big. That's why I'm just going to kind of ignore these, because I've looked through them and they're not too big. With the new utilities, I'll just go through the new utilities. You have Extending Ire. So that increases the range of your Force Scream by 30 meters, which basically means you can use Force Scream as kind of a ranged ability. But it does do a little bit less damage, but then there are stuff that you can do where, like, for example, if you use your Force Push, like the next one, which is is it doing Gauntlet? Okay, maybe it's here. Here we go. Sorry, it was in the same one. So, you know, for example, if I want to use Force Scream, then this will increase the range of my Force Scream. So I can spec for this utility, and then I'll be able to use Force Scream at 30 meters. Basically, it's a ranged ability, but it's going to deal 20% less damage. However, if you use Force Push, then your Force Scream will basically deal the normal damage it does. So that's kind of the way that's going to work. Reckoning. Intercede basically is a little bit more buff now. It increases the damage dealt by your next melee ability by 20%. And Piercing Chill, which means Chilling Scream will pierce enemies with an aching chill. It will deal a certain amount of elemental damage and increase your movement speed by 35%. Now these are pretty good because I personally don't think many people use Chilling Scream in general when they're playing Juggernaut. I definitely don't use it at all, so maybe if this utility is good in PvP, I'll be using Chilling Scream more often. I'm not going to deal with the updated or the removed ones in the interest of saving time. I'm just going to kind of go through the abilities and stuff. Ravage is going to be very similarly updated. It's now become an instant cast. These are very similar to the Juggernaut changes. These have all become passive now, so all those specs with the Marauder have become passive. And then this is what I was talking about, the Disable Droid. This basically shuts down any NPC droid for 60 seconds. That ability has just been removed from the game in general. Now, I'm sorry if I'm not really clear with the Marauders, because I'm just not proficient with Marauders at all. Marauders and Snipers, I do not play both of those classes at all, so I'm just not proficient with them. I don't really know what half the abilities do, but I'll just quickly go through them anyway. God, this video is going to be so long. Alright, Bloody Slashes. So this is a new ability. Oh, sorry, it's a new passive. Remember, all the classes are getting a new passive. Now, damage dealt by Ravage stacks a bleeding effect on the target that builds up to 3 charges and deals a certain amount of internal damage over 9 seconds. So it's basically going to be a damage over time, and your Ravages was going to basically put it on the target. These are just cosmetic changes. Annihilation. So this is going to update your rupture ability. You know, already you get to stab the target for a certain amount of weapon damage, and it causes it to bleed for some internal damage over 9 seconds. These are not too important. Okay, so I thought Gore was always an ability, but whatever. It seems like this is new. It impales the target with both lightsabers, dealing a certain amount of weapon damage, hindering the target for 1.5 seconds, preventing the use of high mobility actions and escapes. Okay, so it's very similar to that net that the Mercenaries Commandos have. Basically, when the Mercenary Commando nets you, you can't use any like escape abilities. So, you know, Imperial agents or operatives can't use their exfiltrate or their role. Sorcs can't use their bubbles. So Gore is going to be a very similar attack. Basically, when you use it, you're not only going to deal a high amount of damage, but your target's also not going to be able to use his high mobility actions. Disembowel. Gore sunders the target for 45 seconds and basically reduces their armor rating. So Gore is going to be a pretty OP attack, it seems. So this says that Bloody Slashes is a new ability, and this says that the Bloody Slashes is being removed. Oh, whoops, okay. For the Fury, okay, so Bloody Slashes is basically, yeah, I had a feeling that was already an attack. Anyways, Bloody Slashes is being moved just to Fury, so only people who are spec'd for Fury are going to have access to Bloody Slashes, and it's being removed from the Carnage spec. So people who are spec'd for Carnage will no longer have access to that attack. Execute, it seems, has been updated. Blast, deal 5% more damage. Okay, so basically it doesn't sunder your target. So this ability itself is being nerfed a little bit, but I think that's because they added in Disembowel. So your Gore is now going to sunder your target, reducing your target's armor rating by 20%. And that's been removed from Execute. Alright, so we're done with that. I'm sorry for being not so clear with the Marauders. I'm just not proficient with that class at all. I don't know what half these abilities are. Remember, cosmetic changes just means they're just changing a few words around, but there's no actual changes to the abilities or anything. Alright, so Sith Assassins and Jedi Shadows. Removed abilities. So Force Lightning has been removed. Crushing Darkness has been removed. Phase Walk has been removed. So Sith Assassins no longer have access to those as of this data mining. Maybe that's not actually the case. That seems pretty extreme, but that seems like that's what's happening. Shock. Damage was nerfed by 4.1%. Electrocute. Damage was nerfed by 2.2%. Force Slow. Damage was nerfed by 4.7%. As we talked about, the stealth was updated, which basically means that they're going to be Sith Assassins and Jedi Shadows will be invisible when they're stealth. They will no longer be able to be seen no matter how close an enemy is. Blackout has been removed. Stealth now increases your stealth level by 15. So basically they just mix Blackout with stealth. So now everyone who uses stealth immediately gets a stealth level increased to 15. There's no need for an ability like Blackout. Recklessness has been nerfed a little bit. It no longer increases the range of Force Lightning or Depredating Bolts to 30 meters. And because you no longer have access to Force Lightning, that's why they took it out. Phantom Stride gets a new icon, who cares about that. Stance is now part of a discipline. So Lightning Charge. Lightning pulses through your double-bladed lightsaber, giving your melee attacks a 50% chance to deal a certain amount of energy damage. So because they're changing all the stances around, they basically are just changing all the wording around of the stances themselves. So there's really, I don't think, anything to change here. There's nothing to really go over. We talked about Guard being updated. Assassin's Training is updated. So it increases your total endurance by 3%, but they kind of nerfed it, I guess. The base damage dealt by shock by 17%. So I guess your shock's basically going to be doing less damage now. So those are pretty hardcore nerfs for the Sith Assassin, and keep in mind this is all primitive information. This is subject to change. It might not be this extreme, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Leave it in the comment section, because I'm really interested to see what you guys think, because in my opinion these are very, very hardcore nerfs. I mean, they're really going hard at Sith Assassins. And I don't think they're going to go easier on the Sorcerer, so I'm excited to get to that part. But let's see what they say here. Yeah, see, they're giving phase walk only to Sorcerers and Sages. And that's how it was originally. Oh no, sorry. That's how it was actually switched around. Only Sith Assassins had access to phase walk, and then they said, you know what, we're going to give it to both classes. Sorcerers and Assassins can have phase walk, and how they kind of switched it around and decided to remove the ability phase walk from Sith Assassins. Okay, so these are just some discipline changes. Specifically for hatred, they get Sinister Succor. Or Succor, I don't know how to pronounce that. But this is a passive that's granted at level 68. Keep in mind, every single class is going to have a passive now that's granted at level 68. The damage dealt by Leeching Strike is increased by 5% for each of your active periodic damaging effects on the target. It could stack up to 3 times. So that's basically going to make your Leeching Strike a lot more powerful and does more damage. And keep in mind, your Leeching Strike also heals you for a certain amount of damage that you do to the target. So it's also going to increase your self-healing by a little bit. Raise has been updated. It seems like just a few cosmetic changes, nothing too big. This seems to have been nerfed a little bit. No longer, oh yeah, because Phantom Stride was removed. Damage is nerfed. One of your dots' damage is nerfed by 2.9%. Demolish, your damage is nerfed by 4.9%. Death Veil, your damage is nerfed by 6%. You know, I never even knew Hatred was that OP, because with the way they're nerfing the spec right now, it makes me feel as though it was really OP right now, but I don't even see many people running Hatred Assassins in PvP. Reaping Strike. This is a new ability that is granted at level 10. You lash at the target with an acrobatic strike, dealing a certain amount of weapon damage, only usable from stealth or within 15 seconds of performing a critical strike. So that's a new ability that's been granted at level 10 for Deception Assassins only. That's pretty cool. So Dark Embrace is going to allow for you to basically have more immediate force when you exit stealth. So when you exit stealth for 15 seconds, your force regeneration is increased by a less percentage though. So before it was for 6 seconds, your force regeneration was increased by 50%. They decided to reduce that to 25%, but now it's for 15 seconds. So I don't know how that's really gonna change everything. It doesn't seem like that big of a change. And because they removed Blackout, they just need to change some of the wording of that. Alright, Darkness Assassins. So these are the tank. These are the changes happening to the tanks. Depredating Volts is now being changed to Discharge Darkness. It is now an instant ability. But everything seems to be cancelled. Whatever. I don't know what that is. Mounting Darkness is the new passive. Deflection grants Mounting Darkness, which causes all enemies within 8 meters to deal 15% less force and tech damage, and this effect lasts for the duration of Deflection. Okay, cool. So that's basically just going to be reducing the amount of damage your enemies can do. The damage dealt by Discharge and Wither is increased by 30%. Okay. Alright, so those aren't too big changes. Overall, the message to take away from that is they got nerfed really hardcore. So let's see if sorcerers are going to have similar luck. Sith sorcerers and Jedi sages. So Thrash and Double Strike was removed because sorcerers and sages are ranged class. I think the more appropriate response is I don't think anyone in the history of playing a sorcerer ever used Thrash. I mean, no one uses that. It's such a useless ability. Saber Strike auto attack remains available, though there is a new legendary utility that replaces Saber Strike with Enfeebling Lash, immobilizing players for 3 seconds. That's pretty cool because as of this moment, Saber Strike is completely useless for a sorcerer. Completely useless. No one ever uses it. And so it's going to be nice to be able to exchange that for something else. Alright, various abilities had their damage and healing nerfed. That's not a good sign. So Thrash is removed. Let's see. Force Lightning is updated. Basically, its damage was nerfed by 9.8%. Wow, that's a big nerf. Damage of Crushing Darkness is nerfed by 4.3%. Damage of Shock is nerfed by 4.1%. Damage of Electrocute is down by 2.2%. Force Low is nerfed by 4.7%. Phase Walk, its cooldown is increased by 15 seconds. Oh god, Lightning Strike damage is nerfed by 4.7%, Affliction damage is nerfed by 3.1%. Oh my god, that's a big nerf of damage of Force Storm. That damage is nerfed by 10.3%. And for those of you who don't know, Force Storm originally was very OP, and they nerfed it I don't know how long ago, and now I guess they're deciding to nerf it even more. And Dark healing was nerfed by 7.4%. That's not that wasn't needed. I mean, Dark Heal was already a pretty weak self heal when it came to Madness Sorcerers and Lightning Sorcerers. They didn't really have, that wasn't an amazing self heal, and so I guess it's going to be even worse of a self heal now. And we already know that Recklessness no longer increases the range of your Force Lightning. Discipline changes, so Lightning. This is the new passive. It increases the damage dealt by shock by 20% on all targets that are affected by Crushing Darkness. Yeah, Lightning Flash, that's nerfed. Chain Lightning is nerfed. Lightning Bolt is nerfed. Thundering Blast is nerfed. Okay, Madness. Death Ripple. Targets hit by your death field have a 50% chance to emit a death ripple, damaging targets within 5 meters of the original target for a certain amount of elemental damage. So that's pretty cool. Basically, it makes your death field more useful, but keep in mind death field was nerfed pretty hard. Force Leech, damage is nerfed. Creeping Terror, damage is nerfed. Demolish, damage is nerfed. Death field, as you guys can see, damage is nerfed by 6%. So, Corruption. So you get a new ability, a new passive. Basically, Static Barrier grants 10 charges of Forbidding Fervor to the target. So when Static Barrier concludes, the target is healed for a certain amount of health per remaining charge of Forbidding Fervor. Targets of your Forbidding Fervor will lose a charge at each time you directly heal them. Okay. Dark Infusion healing is nerfed. Roaming Mend healing is nerfed. Effacious Currents. This seems to be buffed a little bit, so it additionally increases the amount of damage absorbed by your static barrier by 10%. So the healing didn't take that much of a nerf. It's more of the damage that was really hit hard. Alright, Operatives and Scoundrels. So Sneak has been merged into Stealth, so we already know that. In the same way Blackout was merged into the Stealth for the Sith Assassins and Jedi Shadows, the same thing has happened for Sneak. Slice Droid has been removed. Cover has been removed, so that's pretty obvious. I don't think anyone really used Cover when they were playing with Operatives. That's really only used for Snipers and Gunslingers. Snipe and Charged Burst has been removed. Okay. So those are some abilities that have been removed. What that means though is it's kind of good, because when an ability is removed, that means an ability is going to be added. So now that Operatives no longer have access to Snipe, then they're going to have an ability to replace that. So it's always nice to get, it's always nice and cool and exciting to get new abilities. So these have been merged. Take Cover and Snipe and Slice Droid are all abilities that have been removed. And these are the discipline changes. So the Medic, which is the healing spec for Operatives, they get Curative Swell. So your Colto Infusion will grant Curative Swell, which increases the critical chance of your next surgical probe by 100%. So it's basically a free crit for your surgical probe. Lethality gets Erosive Efficacy. Lethal Strike will grant Erosive Efficacy, which increases the critical chance and critical damage or critical healing of all your periodic effects by 30% for 6 seconds. Lethality is already such a dead spec. I don't think that's really going to change anything. So this increases the damage dealt by Lethal Strike, Overload Shot, and Carbine Burst by 5%. But right now, if you use your Lethal Strike, you would also gain Cut Down for 6 seconds, which increases the damage dealt by a Corrosive Grenade and Corrosive Dart, but that's no longer going to apply anymore. Concealment. The new passive that they're getting. Damage dealt by volatile substance marks the target with mutilating methods, allowing your next backstab against the target to be usable while face to face with the target, and treat it as though you attacked from stealth. That's a pretty good passive. Because of the loss of Sneak, the level 32 passive was reworked. So this is Ghost. Now, originally what happened was when you exited stealth mode, it finishes the cooldown of sneak, and sneak can now be used out of stealth mode, which increases movement speed by 50%. Now that they've removed sneak as an ability, activating countermeasures will just have the same effect. It will increase your movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. So instead of using sneak, you will just use countermeasures to achieve the same effect. So these are the new utilities. Mobile Assailer. Exfiltrate will grant a charge of Mobile Assailer, which reduces the energy cost of your next overload shot by 100%, allowing it to be used at 30 meters and making it knock the target back. So, using Exfiltrate will basically give you a buff for your overload shot. An eye for an eye. So evasion grants a charge of eye for an eye, reflecting 150% single target tech or force damage while evasion is active. So not only will evasion make you invincible for a little bit of time, but it will kind of act like Saber Reflect that the Juggernauts have. It will also reflect damage back to them. These are all very cool utilities. The next one is Countermeasures will grant Curative Counter Agent, causing your next Colto Probe to immediately grant 2 stacks. Additionally, Countermeasures heals you for 1% of your maximum health every 5 seconds. I don't think the second part is that important. I mean, 1% of your max health isn't very significant. However, this Colto Probe thing is pretty significant because when I play Operatives, I hate it when I have to waste another global cooldown getting another stack of Colto Probes. So that's going to be pretty good. And it seems as though Countermeasures just in general is being buffed pretty hard. I mean, we saw here that Countermeasures will now increase your movement speed, and now Countermeasures is also going to allow for that if you spec with this utility. So these are just some merge utilities. I'm not really going to go over that. I just want to go over the new ones that we're getting. Alright, Snipers and Gunslingers. So the 4-second hard stun was moved to Operatives and Scoundrels, therefore Snipers and Gunslingers will receive a new hard stun. And the 60-second droid mez has been removed, we know that. And 2 melee abilities have been moved to Operatives and Scoundrels because the Snipers and Gunslingers is a ranged class. So, Debilitate is removed. Snipers will no longer have that 4-second stun, they will have Maim. And Maim will hurl a vibro knife at the target, dealing a certain amount of energy damage and stunning it for 4 seconds. So basically, because Debilitate was a melee stun, they wanted to give them a ranged stun. So now you can use it at a range of 10 meters, when Debilitate was only usable at maybe a range of 4 meters or something. They no longer have Shiv, Overload Shot, or Slice Droid. Those have all been removed. For Marksmanship, they get a new passive. The passive is dealing damage with ambush to a target with less than 30% health grants Finish the Job, which increases the damage of your next takedown by 20%. So basically it makes you a very good executioner. If that target is less than 30% health, you're going to have a very good chance of getting some killing blows on him. Racking Erosion. This is for the Virulent spec. Weakening Blast applies racking erosion to the target, which causes a certain amount of internal damage the next time the target takes damage from your corrosive grenade. So basically just kind of making you have more dot damage. And then Conductive Conduit. This is for engineering. When EMP discharge damages a target, Conductive Conduit deals a certain amount of additional energy damage per stack of electrified railgun on the target. Additionally, EMP discharge harms up to 7 other enemy targets within 5 meters if the primary target is affected by your electrified railgun. I have no clue what any of that means because I have never played engineering the whole time I've played Star Wars: Old Republic, so I have no clue what half those abilities are. Sorry for anyone who plays engineering. These are the utility changes. Once again, I'm just going to go through the new utilities. I'm just going to ignore all of this other stuff. Executioner. Flashbang and Maim grant Executioner, allowing your next takedown within 6 seconds to be used regardless of the target's remaining health and dealing 15% additional damage. So if you use this Executioner alongside your Finish the Job, that's going to make your takedown very, very powerful. Fortuitous Bedlam. Diversion grants 1 stack of Fortuitous Bedlam for every 2 targets initially affected, increasing your armor penetration by 15% per stack. So basically going to make you very good at attacking tanks. Reinforcing Retreat. Covered Escape heals you for 10% of your maximum health, and evasion will now last for 5 seconds. So that's meant to increase your defenses a little bit. And then Counter-Offensive Safeguards. So when Ballistic Shield is activated, you gain a charge of Counter-Offensive Safeguards for up to 4 enemies inside your Ballistic Shield. Each charge increases your damage reduction by 5%. While inside your ballistic shield, you heal for 3% of your maximum health every second, and you are immune to being pulled or knocked around. So it seems like with these utilities, they're trying to give snipers some new defensive abilities, maybe to help them out in ranked and 4v4 arenas, because they can get globaled really hard in those arenas if they don't have good defensive abilities. We are going on to Powertech and Vanguards now. And we are at 34 minutes for this video, so this is going to be really long. AoE abilities have been reworked. Tanking stance requirement has been removed from guard. Defensive cooldowns has been slightly nerfed. Leaping to a target now deals 33% less damage to ensure it is not overpowered in combination with the new battering ram ability. Okay, so that's going to be interesting. Let's see what that ability is. And the cylinder-cell is now passive and is automatically set depending on the discipline. Alright. So for the Powertechs, they no longer have Flamethrower. They have Searing Wave. So this is a new ability. It's a 3-second channel. And it torches everything in a 10-meter cone, with a Flamethrower dealing a certain amount of elemental damage to 8 targets. What is the difference between that and Flamethrower? I have absolutely no idea. Okay. Death from above is removed, and they get Ordnance Onslaught. So while Death from Above basically fired a volley of missiles that dealt a certain amount of kinetic damage, Ordnance Onslaught will do the same thing, but it will deal a certain amount of kinetic damage and a certain amount of elemental damage to the same number of targets over the same number of meters. And it basically has the same effect on weak enemies, it stuns them. So the difference is this deals kinetic damage and elemental damage. Missile Blast is removed, Explosive Dart has been removed, but we get Shatter Slug. So it seems as though the Powertechs and Vanguards are getting a ton of new abilities. It fires a high impact slug from your wrist launcher, instantly exploding on contact with the target, dealing a certain amount of kinetic damage to 8 enemies in an 8-meter area. So they took away Missile Blast and Explosive Dart and gave you a pretty good AoE ability. Because keep in mind, Explosive Dart and Missile Blast did not do very good AoE damage. Like, these are not AoE damage abilities. At least I don't look at them that way, because they do crap damage for AoE. But this seems like it's going to do some pretty decent damage to 8 enemies in an 8-meter area. So that's going to be a pretty good AoE ability. We know Guard has been updated. Coulter Overload has been nerfed a little bit. I think this is the defensive ability that they were talking about. Your health is now only gonna, when your health is reduced to 35% or less. Before it was 40%. And if your health is already at 35%, then it's going to trigger immediately. And when it goes off, it heals you for 35% of your maximum health rather than 40% of your maximum health. The damage of Jet Charge has been reduced by 33%. We know that all of these cylinders and stuff are now going to be automatically given to you as part of your discipline, and you won't need to use them as an ability. They are going to be passive. And prototype cylinders, there just seems to be a cosmetic change. Come on. Okay, there we go. Discipline changes. So with Pyrotech, they get Consuming Conflagration. This is the passive that they get. A Searing Wave causes the next Immolate to deal 20% more damage. So remember, Searing Wave just replaces your Flamethrower. Superheated Flamethrower. It's just some cosmetic changes, it seems. Nothing too big. Okay, for Advanced Prototype. Yeah, these are just cosmetic changes. Cosmetic changes. Yeah. So Firestorm seems to be changed a little bit. It is now an instant ability. This is for the shield tech, so the tank of the Powertechs / Vanguards. Firestorm is now an instant ability, so no longer a 3-second channel. It no longer generates 28 heat. It now only generates 20 heat. And it deals a certain amount of elemental damage. Flame Engine has been buffed a little bit, it seems. It now, direct damage attacks have a 50% chance to trigger this Flame Engine, which finishes the cooldown of Searing Wave and causes your next Searing Wave to generate no heat and deal 100% more damage. So it deals more damage now. It's a pretty good passive. Oil Slick has been buffed a little bit as well. or sorry, it has actually been nerfed, reading that wrong. And now instead of being active for 15 seconds, it is active for only 10 seconds, and the enemies only suffer a 15% melee and ranged accuracy loss rather than 30%. Utility changes. Going over some of the new utilities that you're going to get. You get Reel and Rattle. So Grapple deals a certain amount of tech damage to pull targets and grants Silence is Golden, which causes your next Rocket Punch or Flaming Fist against the pulled target to deal 20% additional kinetic damage and stun the target for 1.5 seconds. This is pretty good because a lot of people use that whole Grapple and then Rocket Punch combo. I've used that a ton, and I've seen a lot of people use that, so this is basically going to make that more powerful. Mutilating Shards. Shatter Slug reduces the movement speed of all affected targets by 75% for 15 seconds, and this effect can only occur once every 30 seconds. That's fine. And then Override Pressure Limiters. Explosive Fuel grants Override Pressure Limiters, allowing Flame Burst, Magnetic Blast, Searing Wave, Firestorm, Shatter Slug, Ordnance Onslaught, Heat Blast, Energy Burst, Immolate, and Scorch to be used at 30 meters for 15 seconds. So keep in mind, Powertechs are meant to be a ranged class, but this specific utility is now going to... Powertechs are meant to be a melee class, but this specific utility is going to be able to make some of your abilities be a lot more ranged if you ever need it. Ignore all the rest. Finally, on to the last one, Mercenaries and Commandos. 2 melee abilities have been removed. As they were saying, they now want ranged classes to be purely ranged classes. One of the defensive cooldowns have been slightly nerfed. That's just going to be the Cult to Overload. It's probably going to have the exact same nerf as the Powertechs did. And then the Cylinder and Cells are now going to be automatically given to you as per the discipline you choose. Rocket Punch and Flamethrower. Those seem to be the 2 removed abilities that were melee. Cult to Overload has been nerfed a little bit. We know that the cylinders are going to work the way now cylinders are working, and these are just some cosmetic changes. So on to the discipline changes. Innovative Ordnance. The new passive that they get is that Mag Shot and Power Shot cause targets with a primed thermal detonator to combust early, dealing an additional certain amount of damage. So makes your thermal detonator be a little bit better. Arsenal gets Barrage updated. Tracer Missile and Sweeping Blasters finishes the cooldown on Unload Blazing Bolts and increases the damage dealt by the next unload. So this seems to be a cosmetic change. And then Bodyguard. Are these just cosmetic changes? So these seem to be... I'm sorry, I've never played Bodyguard before. I mean, I'll just read it out, and then for those of you who play Bodyguard, you'll know what it means. I have absolutely no clue what any of this means. Empowered Scans now increases the healing done by Emergency Scan and Rapid Scan by 10%, but Rapid Scan no longer generates an extra stack of Supercharge when activated. Progressive Scan channels 20% faster, so this seems to be nerfed. Warden seems to be buffed. Rapid Scan will generate an extra stack of Supercharged when activated and also increase the critical healing bonus of all heals by 15%. So basically, if you want your Rapid Scan to generate an extra stack of Supercharged, that's just being removed from this one and being put into the Warden. And then Powered Insulators. Increases the damage reduction by 5%, no matter which combat cylinder you have active, because keep in mind they're now removing combat cylinders. You no longer use them, you just get them as a passive. These are the new utility changes that we're getting. Kolto Surge. Kolto Overload heals you twice as fast and heals you up to 70% of your maximum health. Wow. Additionally, the duration of Kolto Overload is increased by 2 seconds. Okay, that is absolutely insane if you're going to get Kolto Overload to increase your health up to 70%. If they actually implement this, I don't think I'm ever going to see anyone playing Mercenary without using that. I mean, that's basically what Juggernauts get. With Enraged Defense, they get to heal immediately back to 100% health. That's basically what this is going to be for Mercenaries. And it's cool to see that Mercenaries are getting some more defensive abilities. Tag and Bag. Hindering a target with Electronets grants Tag and Bag, increasing your Alacrity by 15% for 9 seconds. Additionally, converting 10 stacks of Supercharge reduces the cooldown of Kolto Overload by 5 seconds. So not only is Kolto Overload going to have a huge buff if you spec with this utility, this is going to actually reduce the cooldown of Kolto Overload, allowing you to use it even more. Trauma regulators. So while energy shield is active, you generate a stack of trauma regulators each time you receive direct damage. Stacks up to 15 times. When energy shield expires, each stack of trauma regulators instantly heals you for 5% of your maximum health. So once again, keeping up with that whole theme of giving mercenaries some more defensive abilities. And then finally, conflict response protocols. So Stealth Scan grants conflict response protocols, increasing the damage or healing dealt by your next non-channel direct damage or healing ability by 20%. For each target revealed from stealth, you generate an additional charge of conflict response protocols. A conflict response protocol stacks up to 5 times and lasts for 10 seconds. So that's pretty cool. Once again, as I mentioned, keeping up with that whole theme of giving mercenaries some more defensive abilities. Alright, so that seems to be it, guys, for the new class changes. Wow, we're at 45 minutes. This is an insanely long video, but I did want to go through everything. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it informative. I myself am really excited for these new class changes. Not so much excited for the huge nerf that assassins and sorcerers are getting. That seems pretty unwarranted. I mean, while I'm not going to say they don't deserve a nerf. They don't deserve that big of a nerf. So I do hope that ultimately gets changed when patch 5.0 hits and they decide to maybe lessen how much they're going to nerf the classes. But overall, I really hope you guys found the video informative. Once again, sorry for stuttering, or sorry if I seemed confused. That's the thing. This is a huge wealth of information, and I did not, go through everything so thoroughly before making the video. So, hope you guys can excuse that. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next one.